Welcome back. We're beginning session 3, and the first article we're going to talk about is Chapter 11 by Samuel Walker, and this is titled Early Intervention Systems. It's a very important article, and it introduces early intervention systems, or EI systems. The EI system is essentially a database management tool that is intended to identify officers that have some sort of performance issue, and this then allows them to be targeted for a correction through some type of intervention. Usually this is counseling, or it might be additional training. EI systems have emerged as an important mechanism for ensuring accountability. In the EI system, performance data is entered into a computer database, and this data could include departmental use of force reports, it could include citizen complaints, officer involvement in civil litigation, resisting arrest charges, really essentially the whole range of possible performance indicators. And some EI systems currently use a dozen or more performance indicators, while others use a smaller number. Probably the more numbers that you have, the better indication you will have as to whether or not there's a problem. The major contribution of an EI system is its capacity to spot patterns of performance and to intervene before problems lead to a serious incident. And what do I mean by a serious incident? This could be a lawsuit, this could be a citizen complaint over something major like an excessive use of force, or some other crisis involving the public. And an early intervention system warns an officer to the extent that it sends an informal but nonetheless a clear message that his or her performance needs improvement. And EI systems have emerged as a recommended best practice in police accountability by a wide range of professional associations. And in addition, EI systems are consistent with the goals of both community policing and problem-oriented policing. And although they are growing in popularity, early intervention systems are still in the early stages of development, according to Walker. And departments are still wrestling with a number of difficult and important issues. And with the budget today in police departments and how there is not the money that there maybe was a few years ago, it's likely that EI systems may even still be put on hold and be put on the back burner, even though Walker doesn't explicitly say that. And if that is happening, I would submit to you that that would be very problematic. Here are some of the main issues that I'd like for you to know about when you're reading over this chapter. Is the EI system separate from the formal disciplinary system? The answer to that question after reading the chapter should be yes, of course, it is separate. And that's one of the essential parts of an effective early warning system. And then there's some other issues too that I'd like for you to consider as you're reading this very important chapter. The next chapter I want to talk about is an article written by Kapler, Slutter, and Albert, and this attempts to focus on police character. They look at different models in order to provide a background into this. They look at the psychological model, which proposes that police character can be explained by either personality approaches or by social psychological influences. Then there's the strict sociological model. This does not accept the idea that personality characteristics alone will predetermine police character. Instead, it suggests that each officer's character is developed solely by the environment in which the officer works. and experiences such as recruitment and training are responsible for the development of values and ethics. And then there's the anthropological model that offers a different and maybe even the most complete explanation of the development of police character. According to this model, the occupational culture is responsible for providing police with a unique working personality. And this has been written on, and you guys have read some of the articles on the working personality of the officer, where police are taught that they are vested with a unique power to use force and carry out the law. And police are taught that they are isolated from society. And then there are also 3 guiding beliefs that define police culture. The authors go into these, and this. Additionally, they also mention that sometimes that the whole notion of police secrecy, and solidarity may include instructions like never give up another cop and watch out for another police officer. In this whole code of silence is something that allows for a lot of officer misconduct to flourish. And so those are a few things to think about as you're reading Chapter 16. Chapter 17 talks about the role of citizen complaints, and it's titled Addressing Police Misconduct. And this chapter focuses on police misconduct, and it's reviewed through the process of citizen complaints. And it's important to point out that the mere nature of police work generates disagreements and hostility. And so it should not be a surprise that complaints will naturally generate from police interactions with citizens. This article acknowledges that an informal police culture often represents legitimate norms that allow officers to conduct their daily activities in a tentative environment. And this creates an unfortunate and difficult situation in which police agencies must find a way to curb norms that foster misconduct. And the failure to find this middle ground may result in the increased application of formal controls on officers, and this will create tension and police insubordination. Traditionally, police departments addressed citizen complaints through some form of internal review system, and there were claims that the internal review process was too lenient on officers. In theory, more civilian input would create greater officer and agency accountability because you don't have cops policing other cops, if you will. There's no evidence to support it, and some officials claim that a civilian process tends to be more lenient than the internal review system. It is important to question whether the true goal of the complaint process is to project an image of legitimacy or to actually provide greater accountability. So there are a tremendous amount of important issues when you're reading through Chapter 17. I have a few key questions here that I'd like for you to look at. Know the dynamics of a typical excessive use of force case. In fact, what do the authors say that 3/4 of excessive use of force cases look like? Where do they happen? And so forth like that. Know reasons why citizens fail to file complaints. Even though this article is about complaints, what about those rare times when they don't file any at all? There actually needs to be more research done just on how often complaints are filed. The next chapter, Chapter 18 by Jocelyn M. Pollock, this focuses on the various ethical dilemmas of police officers in today's society. And it's important to point out that police officers are not the only professionals that are faced with difficult decisions. And she gives a very good example of this involving a doctor. Police officers today have a rather large amount of discretion in their day-to-day activities. The issue of police officers accepting or not accepting gratuities is another cause for debate. Other issues that are discussed, such as officers lying to stay out of trouble, using drugs and alcohol, and engaging in acts of discrimination. And another interesting question is raised by Pollock in this article. Is it ethically acceptable for a police officer to inflict pain on a suspect in order to acquire information and save an innocent victim? This is known as the Dirty Harry problem. And if you've seen the movie Dirty Harry, it's one of the things that Dirty Harry is faced with. Lastly, she talks about undercover investigations. There's also a discussion about interrogation and deceptive interrogation practices, and I think that's extremely interesting, and we'll be talking more about that too in this course. So here are a few of the key items that I think that you should definitely be aware of. Know the different factors that contribute to police corruption according to Pollock. The final article is one that's available on the homepage. It's a supplemental article to download. It came out this year in the Criminal Justice Review, which is one of the better journals, and 208 police managers were interviewed. And essentially what the authors found is that there were the mid-level managers, which included sergeants and on up, agree that there was a lot of deviant and unethical types of behavior that officers engaged in. If you look at page 159 of that article, you'll see some of the various types of behaviors, and they were asked whether or not they would report it or whether or not they would not report it. And you can see that it varies a little bit between sergeants and mid-level managers. The mid-level managers, like the lieutenants and the captains, it looks like there are some reporting differences between the two. And essentially the mid-level managers would be more likely to report the deviant behavior if they saw it happening, and they perceived other police officers were more likely to report than sergeants were. So a lot of interesting findings in this article. The findings indicate that they know about the existence of questionably moral behaviors in their departments. One of the other things I really like about this article is that the authors look at scenarios that were developed by a very famous scholar named Karl Klockers. And if you look at the bottom part in the appendix section, you can see the exact scenarios. There are 11 different scenarios, and then officers were asked, the extent to which they agreed with those or not. And this is just a really good example of quantitative research. I think it's presented in a very straightforward way. A lot of people tend to get a little scared when they think about quantitative research, but I think this article shows that it can be done, and it can be presented very well in a very easy to follow manner. And so there's a lot to be gleaned from this study, and it's one that you'll definitely want to know about. And you can find the Klockers study online. To go back and look at the original source would also be something that you would want to do at some point. Maybe not necessarily in preparation for this class, but I don't think it would hurt at all if you wanted to look at it for your comprehensive exams. So that's pretty much all we have for this session 3. If it may be a little too early to celebrate, but you at least got through this lecture, so I guess you can celebrate a little bit. And I'll be looking forward to seeing you online. And if you have any questions, just feel free to contact me and bring any questions you have to the discussion board. Okay, we'll see you soon.